Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Jess Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. The Asian Development Bank expects the domestic economy to grow faster than initially expected this year, but the lender warns that external headwinds may pose risks to growth.
Edukasyon founder Joey Concepcion urges the government to allow workers from the private sector to receive their second COVID-19 booster shots.
The government's debt payments send the country's dollar position to a wider deficit in June.
And EdTech startup Edukasyon.ph raises new funding. The investment aims to boost the company's tutoring services for K-12 students.
We begin our broadcast with the Asian Development Bank raising its 2022 growth forecast for the Philippines. The Manila-based lender now expects the domestic economy to expand by 6.5% this year, higher than its initial forecast of 6%. ADB attributes the upward revision to looser mobility restrictions, rebound in investments in household consumption, and expansion of the COVID-19 vaccination program. But the lender warns that the elevated prices of global commodities and sharper than expected slowdowns in major industrial economies may pose risk to domestic growth. The revision for the Philippines comes just as ADB forecasts a slower growth for developing Asia. For this year, ADB expects the region to grow by 4.6%, lower than its initial 5.2% projection.
Now, strong growth can reduce the scarring impact of the pandemic on the Philippine economy. That is according to AMRO, or the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office. An AMRO report says some lasting scarring effects of the pandemic have become, quote, increasingly visible and may be difficult to reverse. The most serious impact is on human capital, as seen with increasing unemployment and poverty rates during the pandemic.
Now, in order to vaccinate up to 50% of the eligible population for booster doses in the first 100 days of the Marcos administration, the government is set to launch the so-called Pinas Lakas campaign. That's equivalent to getting a total of 23 million Filipinos boosted. The campaign is also targeting to get at least 90% of the senior population vaccinated. To reach their goal, the health department will set up vaccine sites in public places like churches, wet markets, schools, and transport terminals. That's on top of conducting house-to-house vaccinations for seniors. As of now, only 20% of Filipinos who have their primary doses are also boosted.
Ating mga kababayan nagkaroon na ng kumpiyansa sa first and second dose nila. Kaya parang sinasabi nila, hindi ko na kailangan ng boosters. Hindi naman daw kailangan sa kanilang trabaho, hindi naman daw kailangan pag pumasok sila sa mga public spaces. So hindi na daw lang nila kailangan ng booster.
Meanwhile, Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion is urging the government to allow the private sector to get second booster doses. But the DOH says existing data is insufficient to justify giving second booster shots to non-priority groups. Now, to understand better their push for a second booster dose for economic frontliners, we have on the program Go Negosyo founder Joey Concepcion. Joey, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, you're pushing for the rollout of the second booster dose for the private sector and the general population. But again, the health department says no study yet to prove that it's really necessary for non-priority groups. Your thoughts on that, and how sure are you of that high level of interest from the sector to actually get vaccinated or to get their second booster dose?
First of all, I quite disagree with Yusek Rosette. No? If she says there is no data. First, let's look at it. Both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are manufactured by the Americans. CDC allows 50 years and above to take the vaccines. No? Mm-hmm. So if we buy the vaccines from America, I guess we believe in their science. No? So if CDC has approved it for 50 years old and above, then I don't see any reason why we can't use it in the Philippines. But nevertheless, let's forget that, no? Because right now, from what I get, is that our vaccines are all expiring and have expired, no? So I've been sharing this, that we have about 887,350 AstraZeneca vaccines that are expiring this July. So basically, it's all gone. Now, for Moderna, I'm told that we have about 628,000 vaccines that will expire in August. So if we are to look at the total value of these vaccines that the private sector has purchased, this amounts to close to 1.117 billion pesos that the private sector lost in terms of cash. No? The only thing is that, yes, you cannot prevent vaccines from expiring. No? It's never a perfect situation. But in this case, and I've been calling this as early as this year, no, far early into the year, and not just now. No, I've been saying, let's do it. America's giving for 50 years old. We in the private sector have already given the first boosters to many of our employees long time ago. No, as early as January, February, many of our employees were already taking their boosters for January, February, March. No? And the second boosters is what we hope to have given, no, before it expires. But it's gone. It's too late for us to do that, and we will just have to send our employees maybe to the. But then again, for 60 years old, it's allowed. But for 50 years old, they will not be able to boost our employees because that is not what's approved by HTAM. So that's just my frustration. We lost over 1 billion pesos of vaccines, basically.
Okay, so it's more, sir, na nasasayangan kayo. It's right there. Some people want a second booster shot and they're not technically allowed by the DOH to do so. Sir, will this 1.5, correct me if I'm wrong, 1.5 million doses are set to expire? Will this affect, not just your possibility to procure future vaccines for the private sector, but just the budget that's going to be put into this in the future? Should we be needing more vaccines if you feel nga na that the money could have been better used?
Well, this is not government money. This is private sector money. So the government does not lose out of this. It's private sector that we could have given to our employees in whatever way. But nevertheless, what I'm just saying is that it's done. Hopefully, moving forward, yes, the private sector, I hope, will continue to support the government in buying our own vaccines. And this time, I hope that they would just follow whatever America is going to apply with Moderna and Pfizer. No, it's common sense. I mean, what is the difference between an American person and a Filipino, or a Filipino who's in America? Filipino American, what's the difference? So I don't really understand, and that's coming from a businessman. Okay, we could have deployed this money elsewhere, helped the government somewhere else, but we were just there waiting. I'm not calling the attention just now. I've been saying this as early as February, March, that, hey guys, come on, please, let's move. America's allowing these people to take. What are we doing? Why are we wasting now? Okay, they want to. I'm not saying don't push the first booster. That's the most important, the first booster. Now, the only reason why I'm really pushing hard for this is we want the economy to keep open. We cannot raise alert levels. We have to be green all the time. And number two, many of our kids are going to school, okay? So we got to protect them, because when they go home, they can infect the lolas, the lolos, and their mothers and fathers. No? So yes, there will be more risk as kids goes to school. Hopefully, we can't force them to take the boosters or the vaccines, but definitely we can encourage them. So I'm all for the DOH, what they're doing, going down to the grassroots and vaccinating people. But let us look at the big picture. I mean, here, let's see. I mean, I can understand why this thing was just ignored. No?
So, sir, sorry to interrupt, but what percentage of the private sector has had their first booster? Because nationwide, it's 20%. Were you more successful in actually deploying the vaccines you procured for the private sector in getting most people boosted, at least the first dose?
The first booster, yes. In fact, in our corporation, we're close to 80%. Many others are higher. It depends on who company you talk to. Of course, there are also resistance in the companies, but definitely, since we also gave it to those who are qualified, the first booster, everybody was qualified, right? 12 to 17, 50 years and above, no problem. Everybody was allowed to take the first booster shot. So it was a very high, no issue there. Now, it's just here that we still have vaccines that were really meant for the second booster, no? Had it been allowed, that's all.
Okay. Now, Joey, shifting the conversation a bit here regarding the alert level system here, you have the Marcos administration retaining it for now, but the DOH also saying that, tweaks are needed, improvements are needed. What tweaks is the private sector hoping for, or is there even a need to recalibrate the alert level system?
Well, I think we have sent a letter to the president on our recommendation, one of which is that we hopefully we are suggesting to shift towards the traffic light, which is green, yellow, and red. No, and the factors there that determines whether you're green, yellow, and red is basically ADAR and HCUR. No, so basically ADAR it'll be easier to understand because we all know the traffic light. When it's green, it's go. When it's yellow, okay, that's a warning. When it's red, it's completely stopped. ADAR less than 6, HCUR less than 50%, it's green. No? So ADAR greater than 18 and HCUR greater than 50%, then it's red. What does that mean? Healthcare utilization rate is the most critical here. Hospitals cannot, be full of people. At the moment, there's a lot of people in the hospitals, then we are in trouble. So why am I trying to do all of this, support the vaccination drive, especially the first booster, is because we cannot move our alert level ones to a higher level, or if we adopt the color green, yellow, and red, we can't be in the yellow or in the red. We have to be always in the green because we're now entering a new tropical depression. I'm saying that these high rising prices can lead into another storm. Right now, to me, it's a tropical depression. Eventually, if that we can control the situation, then it becomes a storm. Then you have the possibility of hospitals going, full. Then that's what we are trying to avoid. We have to control maintain our health situation, which is very good right now, and we have to make sure that the tropical depression in the economy just continues to be a tropical depression.
Sir, if you are pushing buffer every time to be green, why the need for alert levels pa? I mean, the other countries have basically just, chucked this all together. They don't even require vaccine cards. They don't even require tests to enter their country. And as such, tourism has boomed and people are more mobile. At what point can we say in the Philippines, especially with the lower cases, that we need to move on and we don't need these sort of alert levels, especially now as you're sitting, of course, on the private sector advisory council of the president?
First of all, if you ask me, we can't go in red or yellow anymore. We have to always be in green because we are approaching a very tough situation. I believe that there's still a lot of opportunities. I believe we can still hit a growth rate of 6.5 GDP. And that's why it has to be in green. The moment you go to yellow and red, then game over. So what do we have to do? Vaccinate, especially the first booster shots. Now, if we can, and we have enough vaccines, now the private sector has no more because they are expiring, then maybe the government can continue to give those who want to take the second booster shots. No? So the health of the economy is so critical also at this point in time. You want to have a high growth rate, you have to ensure consumer spending is there. How that has happened? You have to have mobility. You have the schools are opening, so that's added mobility. That's great. Many people are still working from home. No? We got to get them to work in the office, and that's very important. You can see the office buildings, they're not full yet. So we got to get them back to office. And that's where you can create more consumer spending. No? So all of these measures have to be done. And let's be an optimist. I think we will be able to weather the storm. I'm only appealing to DOH if they can find a way how to solve this problem, because I cannot really understand why a vaccine in America is being given to 50 years and above.
Okay, clear points there. Thank you so much. That was, of course, Joey Concepcion, Go Negosyo founder. Salamat, sir.
Thank you.
Pausing for a quick break, but coming right up after that. How does the edtech sector intend to address the learning crisis in the country? We'll talk to an industry expert for the lowdown, and Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. And we're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. Now, it's both an exciting and challenging time for EdTech at a pivotal moment for the future of education. Here to share more on how their platform is riding the wave, we have on the show Motte-Muñoz, Edukasyon.ph founder and Chief Strategy Officer. Hi, Henri, and welcome back.
Hi, Danie. Thank you so much for having us.
All right, Henri, before we dive into the education issue, which is, of course, a massive issue to be tackling here, let's kick off with the funding round that you guys just got. How much? How important? What will you be using it for?
Sure. So we unfortunately never disclosed a specific round, but we've now raised over $5 million in the last couple of years. And so, that's money we've been able to invest in developing solutions for Filipino learners. For this round, it's very important for us to be investing in tutoring. So that's the new delivery we set up earlier this year. And happy to share a bit more the work that we're doing there for tutoring folks.
Okay, any teaser for us on whether unicorn status might actually be there?
Working on it.
All right, all the best with that.
Now, Henri, earlier you mentioned about Edge Tutor. Give us more, nuance that a bit more for us. What is this exactly? What pain point are you trying to address here? And what's interesting here is you are focusing on math and English. Why is that? And are there at least plans to expand this to other subjects?
Sure. So thanks for that question, Dan. So Edge Tutor is one-on-one online tutoring. It's focused on students aged 4 to 16. Though we're seeing more pickup for the earlier years, and it's about making learning joyful and fun, which is very important because there's been a lot of a lot of difficulties raised by COVID. Students become very anxious about going back to school. It's with very high quality teachers. We take less than 2% of applicants to become an Edge Tutor, so we really get the best of the best for students. And it's a world-class curriculum that's been developed by a team with a decade of experience building curriculums in the US and China, and now in the Philippines. And all of this, bookable from a device in a couple of minutes. So it's very convenient, very reliable. Now, to your question on math and English, there's been a lot of studies that have come out in the last year or two, where frankly the Philippines has not done well compared to its peers. And not just, international peers in North America or Europe, but peers very close to home. We have worse math and English scores than most of our ASEAN neighbors, despite, having a long history of investing in education. So there's a lot of foundational skills that we need to work on. And English and math are the most foundational skills, so that's what the view is to expand to other subjects. I can actually share with you exclusively that we'll be offering Filipino in the next couple of weeks. So I'm very excited to bring Tagalog classes live. But yes, the plan is to expand to other subjects, but the foundational ones are very, very, and we're seeing a lot of them.
Okay, so at least building on the foundation for now, at least on math and English, but perhaps, of course, expanding it as well to other subjects. But how has the platform performed, at least during the past 2 years? Have you seen growth, at least in enrollments and listings? And do you see a return to face-to-face classes affecting your numbers?
Sure. So I think Edukasyon was always an online-first platform, and I think student interest was always quite high in the online. Gen Z is very much a internet digital-first generation, but we did see a lot of pickup during COVID. I think we grew from about 200,000 registered students to more than 1 million. We just reached the mark, I believe, this month. And we still have an audience of about 8 million students a year. So we saw more pickup, more interest. I think what's been very interesting for us, though, is we initially were always focused on 4 to 24-year-olds. And during COVID, we saw massive adoption by Gen Alpha, which is the under 14-year-olds, for online education. And that's what prompted us to get into Edukasyon. It's a younger demographic than one we've served before. And they were not necessarily using online education prior to COVID.
Okay, Henri, let's take a step back. You have a lot of insights on education in general in the sector in the Philippines compared to maybe other countries and how badly placed we are. Give us a feel of how important going back to in-person classes is right now, how crucial that is for learning versus the blended approach that you guys are, of course, pushing for.
Sure. So I think, our view about blended learning is face-to-face is incredibly important. I'll show the reasons why. And, we position, the products we're developing are for after school. It's supplementary learning. And our view is online is great for supplementary. It's very efficient. It's from the safety of a child's home. You're not exposing a minor to any adults in a physical room. It's actually fantastic for the tutors because they're not spending time in traffic. They can just teach back-to-back classes and earn more. So for supplemental education, online is a win-win. In terms of tracking outcomes, in terms of child safety, child learning, in terms of tutoring. Face-to-face is incredibly important. We've actually been very much openly pushing for face-to-face classes for a long time now because there's a lot of benefits, right? There's the socialized learning. That's very important, right? You learn from your teacher, but you also learn from your peers. That's much, much easier to do that in a classroom setting. Secondly, it's the focus setting, being in a classroom, place for learning. Much easier to learn when you're surrounded by other classmates who are all learning the same thing as you than when you're at home competing for the connection with working parents and other siblings. And it's noisy and there's distractions, etc. And then third of all, we mustn't forget one of the functions of education. Yes, it is learning. Yes, it is social development for the child. It is also childcare for the parents. You just had Joey Concepcion speak earlier, and the reality is that if you want parents to be able to work and fully invest themselves in their very demanding careers, whether they're online or offline, it's a lot easier to do if you have a professional, aka a teacher, a licensed teacher, who's looking after your child and not just teaching them, but essentially caring for them. And so there's massive benefits for the children. There's massive benefits for the parents as well. And so going back to class is incredibly important. And I'm very excited that the new Deputy Secretary, has stated publicly that she feels very strongly about students taking the class.
Okay, in terms of that, what exactly should at least Vice President Sara Duterte do in terms of low-hanging fruits here? I mean, how ready are we to go back to full face-to-face classes by November? I mean, we still, while interest is high, there are still a number of considerations here, especially when we're talking about vaccination of minors. There are also financial constraints here with gas prices and transportation issues. So how ready are we?
Look, the reality is you're never perfectly ready. I think what's very interesting is we saw the return to class in other markets, in other countries, both developed countries, more emerging markets. And and again, as Joe mentioned earlier, you will get transmission, right? That's unavoidable. You will get transmission for students. Many of them can then work at home, and so you will have a wave of COVID that will be caused by students going back to the classroom. But research has shown over the last years that the benefit of bringing students back into the classroom outweigh that risk and that cost. Now, I think with regards to things like gas prices, these are real issues, but they're not limited to education. I think whatever the government wants to do in terms of supporting access to transport just needs to be wide enough that it doesn't just apply to workers and office workers and blue collar and any types of workers, but also to students who may not be able to afford the transportation. But it would be a tragedy if we let high gas prices get in the way of a long awaited return to the classroom.
Okay, good points there. Of course, Edukasyon.ph pushing for face-to-face classes, but also a full suite of offerings here to supplement our learning during the transition period, including Edge Tutor. So congratulations on that funding round, and we'll be watching out for more updates on that. Thank you so much, Motte-Muñoz, founder of Edukasyon.ph.
Thank you both. Have a nice day.
The country's balance of payments position has remained in a deficit for a third straight month in June. The shortfall last month stood at $1.57 billion, widening from the $312 million deficit in the same month last year. But the June deficit slightly narrowed from the $1.61 billion gap recorded in May. This resulted in the BOP deficit widening to $3.1 billion in the first half of the year from the nearly $2 billion deficit in the same period in 2021. The BSP said this mainly reflected the outflows from the government's foreign currency withdrawals used to settle foreign debt obligations.
Motte-Muñoz-led Union Bank is seen to close by as early as next month its acquisition of Citi's consumer banking business in the Philippines. Union Bank President and CEO Edwin Bautista told the Philippine Star that closing the transaction may happen very soon, as they have already informed the PSE of the central bank's approval of the deal. The takeover covers the consumer banking business of Citibank Philippines, which includes its credit card, retail deposit, personal and unsecured loans and asset management portfolio. However, Citibank Philippines will retain institutional accounts after the transaction.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away. You will have the latest on the local bourse when the Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
All right, Dan, a lot of global headlines to be watching here. Give us a very quick look of how the market is going so far.
All right. Well, despite the fact, of course, that it's been pretty rocky, S&P 500 overnight was posting its first back-to-back gain in 2 weeks, and that seems to be spilling over into our local bourse. We're jumping by 0.8% here above the 6,300 levels. And just big focus on the financials here, especially as BPI has just released its second quarter earning. That's the first big gun to release 2Q, and that is at 12.5 billion pesos. That's up by 82.9%. Second quarter revenues is 35.6% up, 32.3 billion pesos. They mentioned this is the highest quarterly net income. They mentioned that is a record that they've actually seen on the back of robust non-net interest and non-net interest income. Loans were also up 14.4% year on year. But take a look at the leaderboard here when it comes to banks. That is Union Bank, close enough to closing that acquisition of Citi. Union Bank leading the financials up by 2 7/10 of a percent this Thursday morning, Jess.
All right, and that's it for today, July 21, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess Delos Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides.